"You don't belong here," they told her, unaware they were speaking to the woman who owned the building beneath their feet. Days later, she returned in a Rolls-Royce, documents in hand, and truth in her eyes. What followed was a takedown no one saw coming. Fraud exposed, a CEO fired, and a grieving widow reclaiming her husband's empire. But how deep did the betrayal go? And how far was she willing to go to restore his legacy? Stay tuned and watch the story unfolds. Rachel sat quietly in the oversized leather chair, her hands folded in her lap, a tired look in her eyes. Dressed in simple black slacks and a blouse that had seen better days, she looked like a woman trying to hold it all together and barely managing. It had only been 6 weeks since David's funeral. 6 weeks since she stood beside a closed casket, holding the hands of her 2 children, her mind reeling from the suddenness of it all. Her husband had been healthy, young, alive, and then, in the blink of an eye, gone, a heart attack at just 41. Now, Rachel was in a lawyer's office, expecting nothing more than some paperwork to finalize, maybe a small life insurance policy, maybe some shared bank accounts. She had come alone, asking her mother to stay with the kids. She thought this would be simple, procedural, quick. She was wrong. Mr. Collins, the family lawyer, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, eyes scanning the thick manila folder resting between them. "Rachel," he began softly, "before we begin, I want you to know that your husband left very specific instructions. He asked that everything be revealed to you personally, and only after his passing." Rachel's brow furrowed. "Reveal?" He nodded and pushed the folder toward her. "David was more private than even you might have realized. He built a great deal in his life, quietly, carefully, but he wanted you to know that it was always for you and the kids." She opened the folder slowly. Inside were multiple deeds, registration papers, and corporate documents. Her eyes darted across company names, logos, legal seals. One name stood out in particular, Callahan Luxury Motors. Her breath caught. "Wait," she said, pointing to the document. "Isn't this the—" "Yes," Mr. Collins interrupted gently. "One of the largest luxury car dealerships in the county. He owned it. Completely." Rachel shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't understand. He never mentioned any of this." "He worked in IT, software contracts, coding, that's what he did." Mr. Collins smiled faintly. "That's what he allowed most people to think. But for the last 12 years, David had been quietly investing, acquiring businesses, building a small empire, in your name, I might add." She stared at the paperwork. The names of 3 other companies followed: a real estate management firm, a small logistics company, and a regional consulting group. All signed, all sealed, all legally passed into her ownership. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, blinking back tears. "Why didn't he tell me?" "He wanted to surprise you, or perhaps protect you from the stress of it while he was alive. But he trusted you. He made sure everything would be safe in your hands, should anything ever happen to him." Rachel leaned back, struggling to breathe evenly. The room felt too big, too quiet. She hadn't been prepared for this. She thought today would bring closure. Instead, it opened a new door she didn't even know existed. Mr. Collins continued, his tone respectful but firm. "You are now the majority shareholder and legal owner of all these businesses. I'll help walk you through every detail, but I recommend you visit each one, meet the staff, get a sense of how they're operating, especially the dealership." Rachel looked up. "Why especially that one?" "There's been some irregularities in its accounting, for what I understand. David had flagged it before he passed, but hadn't yet acted on it." Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the folder and held it to her chest. She didn't know how to run a business. She barely knew how to fix the leaking sink in the kids' bathroom. But here she was, with ownership of entire companies resting in her lap, like a sleeping lion. "I'm just a mom," she murmured. "No," Mr. Collins said gently. "You're his wife, and now you're the one who carries his legacy forward." Rachel stood slowly, still dazed but grounded. Confused, yes. Overwhelmed, absolutely. But deep beneath all that was something else, something that had been quiet since the day David died. Purpose. "I'll visit the dealership tomorrow," she said at last. I need to see it for myself. Mr. Collins nodded. I'll notify the general manager. Would you like me to arrange a formal visit? She paused, then shook her head. No, I'll go just as I am. She stepped out into the rain, not noticing it soaking through her coat. She didn't need a plan. Not yet. All she needed was to walk through the doors her husband built and find out what kind of world he left behind. The dealership's glass doors slid open with a soft mechanical whisper, revealing a showroom bathed in sunlight and polished chrome. Sleek cars lined the marble floor like artwork, pristine, extravagant, intimidating. Rachel stepped inside, her toddler balanced on her hip, a diaper bag slung over one shoulder, and the same modest outfit she'd worn to the lawyer's office the day before. Her sneakers squeaked faintly as she walked across the glossy floor. Heads turned almost immediately. A pair of sales associates leaned in toward each other at the front desk, eyes flicking from Rachel's tired eyes to the wriggling child in her arms. Their whispers weren't loud, but they were intentional, just enough for her to notice. One of them chuckled, barely covering his mouth with a clipboard. Rachel scanned the room, looking for someone who might recognize her late husband's name. The dealership was massive, modern, and yet somehow sterile. It didn't feel like David. But the name Callahan Motors was still etched in silver on the wall. It was his. "Excuse me," she said softly to a passing salesman, a tall man with slicked back hair and a tight suit that looked more expensive than her monthly rent. "Is there someone I can speak to about ownership?" The man gave her a once-over, his eyes pausing at the diaper bag, then the baby tugging at her hair. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "this isn't a public assistance office. These are high-end vehicles. Our customers book appointments." Rachel's lips parted slightly in surprise. "I'm not here to buy a car." He raised an eyebrow, already disinterested. "Then I'm afraid there's nothing here for you. I just need to speak with whoever is in charge. Please, it's important." At that, he motioned toward the entrance with a smirk. "Ma'am, people like you don't belong here. Let's not make a scene." Heat flooded her cheeks. Before she could respond, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder and started guiding her toward the exit. Not forcefully, but with the kind of manufactured politeness that stung more than a shove. Other customers turned to look. A woman in heels narrowed her eyes. Someone in the corner chuckled under their breath. Rachel clutched her child tighter, keeping her gaze low, letting the salesman usher her toward the door as if she were some sort of intruder in a palace. Humiliation burned in her throat, but she said nothing. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was fuel. As the glass doors slid shut behind her, she stood for a long moment outside, blinking against the midday sun. Her toddler cooed softly, resting his head on her shoulder. Her fingers tightened around the strap of the diaper bag. She looked back through the window at the man who had dismissed her, now laughing with another salesman at the desk. Her heart beat slower, calmer. They didn't know. They didn't care to know. But tomorrow they would. Rachel turned and began walking down the sidewalk, the same quiet strength in her step. Only now, it carried something more. The front door clicked shut behind her, muffling the outside world. Rachel leaned back against it, eyes closed, the weight of the moment pressing hard on her chest. Her son had fallen asleep on the way home, his tiny fist clutching her shirt. She shifted him carefully onto the couch, kissed his forehead, then stood in the middle of the room, silent, still. The laughter of those salesmen still echoed in her ears. She walked into the kitchen, reached for the drawer where she'd placed the folder from Mr. Collins, and carried it to the dining table. The house was modest, a 2-bedroom rental with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet in the bathroom. But it was home. At least, it had been. Until her world shifted. She opened the folder slowly, spreading out the contents like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't dared to believe in before. The documents were clear. Her name, printed in bold letters. Rachel A. Callahan, majority shareholder. Legal beneficiary, sole proprietor. The dealership's corporate registration, tax filings, ownership transfer papers, all of it was there. All of it legal. The disbelief she'd felt at the lawyer's office was gone now. In its place, something colder, sharper. They had kicked her out of her own building. Rachel sat down, picked up her phone, and dialed. Collins, Law and Heart, came the receptionist's voice. "This is Rachel Callahan. I need to speak with Mr. Collins. It's urgent." She didn't have to wait long. His voice came through warm and steady, just like always. "Mrs. Callahan, is everything all right? I visited the dealership," she said plainly. "I wasn't exactly welcomed." A pause. Then, "They don't know who you are." "No," she said. "They don't." There was a pause again. Then Mr. Collins asked, "Would you like me to set up a formal meeting? Notify their executive office?" Rachel shook her head, though he couldn't see it. "No, I want to do this myself. Tomorrow." He hesitated. "Understood. But just to be clear, your legal ownership is uncontested. You hold a controlling interest in Callahan Luxury Motors and all its assets. You don't need anyone's permission to walk through those doors." "I know," she said softly. "Thank you." After hanging up, she sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the paper that now represented her power, her right. It felt surreal. A day ago, she'd been invisible. Now, she owned the building that made her feel small. She stood up, carefully returned each document to its place, and placed the folder into her handbag. Upstairs, she laid her son in his crib, his chest rising and falling with soft, even breaths. She lingered there for a moment, brushing a hand over his hair, whispering a silent promise. She wouldn't let him grow up thinking they were small. The next morning came with clarity. She rose early, ironed the best blouse she had. Navy blue, modest but sharp. She paired it with black slacks and the low heels she hadn't worn since David's funeral. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, her shoulders squared. There was no performance in her steps. No need to pretend. She wasn't dressing to impress. She was dressing to lead. By mid-morning, her child was with her mother, and she was behind the wheel of one of her late husband's cars, something commanding. A Rolls-Royce. As she merged onto the main road, she glanced once at the folded documents on the passenger seat. Yesterday, they saw a woman who didn't belong. Today, they'd meet the woman who owned everything they stood on. The sunlight glinted off the polished hood of the midnight blue Rolls-Royce as it rolled into the dealership parking lot, its low purr drawing a few curious glances from customers near the entrance. Heads turned, eyebrows lifted. It wasn't every day a car like that arrived unannounced. Not even here. Behind the wheel, Rachel sat in quiet stillness. Her posture was calm, composed. Her hair was pulled back in a neat twist, her blouse tucked sharply into tailored slacks, and her heels clicked softly as she stepped out, clutching a slim leather folder beneath one arm. This time, she didn't carry a diaper bag. This time, she didn't wear exhaustion. This time, she wasn't invisible. As she approached the entrance, she saw them, the same two sales associates from the day before, lounging behind the front desk, sipping coffee and pretending to work. One of them looked up, froze for a beat, then nudged the other with a sharp elbow. Their eyes widened. Recognition dawned slowly, and then panic. Rachel didn't flinch. She walked through the glass doors as if she had been doing it for years. The space looked the same. Pristine cars, sleek lighting, walls lined with luxury branding. But the power in the room had shifted. The taller salesman stepped forward, a forced smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. "Good morning, ma'am. May I?" "You may not," Rachel said, her tone calm but cold. "Where's your general manager?" He blinked. He's in his office." "Did you have an appointment?" Rachel reached into her folder and pulled out the document on top. A single page with her name printed in bold above the company's seal, majority ownership certificate, Callahan Luxury Motors. "I won't be needing one." The man stared at the paper. His mouth opened slightly, then shut again. Behind him, the other associate stood rigid, his coffee cup forgotten on the desk. "I was here yesterday," Rachel continued. "You told me I didn't belong." The taller man's face flushed. We didn't know." "No, you didn't care," she interrupted, her voice unwavering. "You saw a tired woman with a baby, and you assumed she wasn't worth your time." He swallowed hard. On behalf of the team, truly apologize. We were out of line." "I'm not here for apologies," Rachel said, stepping forward. "I'm here for accountability. Get your general manager." The man didn't wait for another word. He disappeared down the hall like a man running from a fire. Rachel turned slowly and scanned the room. A few customers watched her from a distance, murmuring. The silence hung thick, not with awkwardness but anticipation. Within minutes, the general manager emerged, a heavy-set man in a crisp blue suit, adjusting his tie and feigning a confident smile. "Mrs. Callahan," he said with a half-bow. "We weren't expecting you." "I'm aware," Rachel replied. She handed him a second document, a formal notice of ownership verification and her right to perform an internal audit. His face paled as he scanned the paper. "I see. Well, I assure you, everything is in excellent order here." "We'll find out," she said. "I'll be meeting with the department heads over the next few days. For now, I'd like a full tour of the building." From my perspective, the manager nodded stiffly, gesturing toward the hallway. "Of course. Right this way." As Rachel followed him deeper into the building, the staff parted like water around her. Some whispered apologies. Others offered nervous smiles. But none of it moved her. She didn't come for their approval. She came to reclaim what was hers. Her heels clicked sharply against the tiled floor, echoing through the halls with a rhythm that didn't just say she belonged. It said she was in charge. And for the first time since her husband's death, Rachel didn't feel lost. She felt powerful. She felt ready. And she had only just begun. The conference room was silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the central air. Rachel stood at the head of the long glass table, her leather folder neatly opened before her. Around her sat the dealership's top executives, department heads, senior managers, finance officers. Most of them wore polished suits and tight smiles, their eyes flicking between Rachel and each other, trying to measure how serious this was. They hadn't expected her to return. They certainly hadn't expected her to return like this. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Rachel began, her tone firm and measured. "I understand this dealership has run a certain way for years. But as of now, there will be changes. Starting with a full internal audit." The room shifted. Someone coughed. A few exchanged uneasy glances. "I'll be reviewing all financial records," she continued. "Payroll, vendor contracts, commissions, bonuses, everything. And I won't be doing it from a distance. I'll be on site every day. If you have nothing to hide, this process will be simple." A man in a gray suit raised his hand slightly, then spoke without waiting. "Mrs. Callahan, with all due respect, audits are best left to professionals. We've used a third-party firm for years." Rachel raised a hand, stopping him. "And that firm reported to the former CEO? Not to me. That changes today." The tension in the room thickened. A few nodded politely. One man, the head of sales, leaned back in his chair with his arms folded, visibly unimpressed. Rachel made a mental note of that. Over the next week, she worked tirelessly from the corner office once used by her late husband. She turned it into a temporary operations center. Whiteboards with scribbled notes, a laptop always open, and documents spread in labeled folders. She met with department managers individually, asking calm but direct questions. Most answered her openly. Some stumbled. A few clearly underestimated her. But Rachel didn't miss a detail. Every receipt, every expense report, every bonus payout. What started as subtle inconsistencies grew louder with every page turned. Line items for consulting that had no attached records. Large cash withdrawals marked as miscellaneous operations. Vendor invoices signed off without any product ever delivered. The same name, Holloway Solutions, kept appearing. But no one could explain what they actually provided. Rachel called in the junior accountant, a nervous woman in her 20s who looked like she hadn't expected to be summoned by the new boss. "I just need clarity," Rachel said gently. "There's no punishment, but I need the truth." The woman looked at the papers, then at Rachel. And slowly, the truth began to unfold. "The CEO approved those payouts personally," she whispered. "He said not to question them. If anyone asked, we were told to say they were promotional expenses." Rachel's jaw tightened. She nodded slowly, thanked her, and dismissed her. By Friday, the picture was clear. Money was disappearing, and someone was making sure it stayed buried. That evening, as the dealership lights dimmed and the lot emptied, Rachel sat alone in the office, hands steepled beneath her chin. Her eyes were tired but sharp. Her husband had trusted the wrong people. And now, the rot was showing. But she wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't afraid. She had seen how they looked at her when she first walked in. The silent judgment, the dismissive glances. To them, she was just a grieving widow playing dress-up in a business suit. Let them think that. Because when she stood up from that chair, her next steps wouldn't just be about uncovering theft. They would be about reclaiming every inch of the legacy her husband built and proving, beyond a doubt, that this company would never again be run by deception. Not while Rachel Callahan was in charge. Rachel stood at the head of the table, her hands resting firmly on a stack of files. Her presence was quiet, but it commanded the room. She wasn't just the owner now, she was the reckoning. At the far end sat the man everyone once deferred to, Vincent Hartley, the dealership CEO. He looked as polished as ever. Navy pinstripe suit, designer watch flashing on his wrist, and that trademark smirk that had charmed boardrooms and investors for years. But today, that smirk faltered at the edges. Rachel took a deep breath. "I called this meeting because it's time for clarity," she began, her voice even. "Over the past 10 days, I've reviewed every major financial document tied to this dealership. Every contract, every payout, every signed invoice. And what I found," she picked up the top folder and opened it, "was theft." The word rang out like a gavel. Several staff members shifted in their seats. One woman closed her eyes. A few others looked down at the table, not daring to meet Rachel's gaze. Vincent cleared his throat, trying to inject confidence into his tone. "Rachel, I think you've misunderstood some of the figures. These accounts span years." "I've done the math," she interrupted. "Over $2.3 million in untraceable funds routed through shell vendors, including Holloway Solutions, which doesn't exist in any commercial registry." "Care to explain?" Vincent leaned back, a practiced calm on his face. "Consulting services for marketing and outreach. Sometimes, for privacy, we use contractors not registered under traditional channels." Rachel tossed a document across the table. It slid to a stop in front of him. "The signature on that invoice is yours. The bank account it was paid to, registered under your name. Personal, not corporate. That's embezzlement, Vincent." A ripple went through the room. Someone exhaled sharply. Another whispered, "I knew it." Vincent's eyes flicked to the paper. He hesitated. "I think there's been a mix-up. That account was temporary, used to manage bonuses. The board approved discretionary use." "No." Rachel cut in, voice harder now. "I'm the board, and I've found no such approval anywhere in our records." Vincent straightened in his seat, his charm cracking under the weight of her evidence. "You're new to all this, Rachel. This business requires experience, not assumptions. I've run this place for nearly a decade." While robbing it blind, she finished. "You may have built your image on charm and power suits, but behind the glass walls, you siphoned from my husband's company, from his legacy." He stood up, voice rising. "This is a mistake. You don't understand what it takes to keep this place running." Rachel held up a final document. "This one shows a $78,000 promotional retreat to the Cayman Islands. You used company funds for a personal vacation. You bought silence, loyalty, and God knows what else." He stared at her, jaw clenched. "I'm done," she said quietly. "You're terminated. Effective immediately." The room went still. Vincent's face flushed with fury. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked around for backup, for support, but found none. No one spoke. No one defended him. One by one, the staff turned their eyes back to Rachel. He finally stepped back, muttering under his breath as he reached for his phone and stormed out of the room. The door closed behind him with a final, echoing click. Rachel turned to the team. "Let me be clear," she said. "This company will no longer be led by arrogance, fraud, or fear. If you're here to do honest work, you'll have every ounce of my support. If not, start packing." For the first time, someone at the table nodded, then another, and then applause. Quiet, hesitant, but real. Rachel didn't smile. She didn't need to. She had just reclaimed her husband's company, and she wasn't letting it go again. The light felt different today, not cold or sterile like before, but warm, full of something new. A fresh beginning. Rachel stood at the center of the showroom floor, surrounded by the entire staff. Technicians had paused their work in the garage. Sales associates had stepped away from their desks. Accountants and administrators lined the stairwell and watched from the mezzanine. She wore a soft cream blazer over dark jeans, approachable but strong. In one arm, she held her toddler, who was squirming slightly, fascinated by the gleam of the chrome wheels nearby. Her daughter stood quietly beside her, holding her hand, wide-eyed but smiling. They had never seen her like this, not just as their mother, but as something bigger, as a leader. Rachel took a breath and stepped forward. The room quieted instantly. "I know most of you didn't expect this," she began, her voice steady. "A few weeks ago, I walked through those doors and was told I didn't belong here, that I couldn't afford to stand where I stood, that I wasn't welcome." She paused, letting the memory hang in the air. "And maybe I didn't look like the person you thought should run a place like this. But what you didn't know was that my husband built this company. He poured his vision into these walls, quietly, intentionally, and with purpose. He wanted something lasting, something honest." She let her eyes scan the room. There was no tension now, just attention. "I've seen the cracks, in the books, in the leadership, in the way some of you have been treated. I've seen good employees overlooked and others silenced. That ends today." A few heads nodded slowly. Someone near the back crossed their arms, not defensively, but with a shift in posture that said, "Finally, I'm not here to run this dealership with fear or flashy suits. I'm here to rebuild it on the foundation my husband intended: respect, integrity, and excellence. That means honesty in how we sell, fairness in how we treat each other, and pride in the work we do." Rachel adjusted her son on her hip, kissed the top of his head, and continued. "Going forward, I'll be involved in daily operations. You'll see me here. I'll ask questions. I'll listen. I'll expect transparency, not just from you, but from myself." She gestured toward the cars surrounding them, each one pristine, a reflection of value and craftsmanship. These vehicles are not just metal and engines. They're trust. Every customer who walks in deserves more than just a price tag. They deserve to be seen and heard, just like I deserved it when I first walked in. The staff were fully with her now, expressions softening, a few smiling. Even the technicians from the back had stepped forward. Rachel took a final breath, grounding herself in the moment. This isn't just a dealership anymore. It's a promise to our customers, to each other, and to the Callahan name. And I promise you, we're going to make this place something to be proud of again. As she stepped back, the room filled with applause. It wasn't forced. It wasn't polite. It was real, a slow-building, earnest sound that echoed through the showroom like a turning tide. Rachel smiled gently, then crouched to take her daughter's hand. The little girl beamed. They walked together between the rows of cars, her son gurgling happily in her arm. The same floor that once dismissed her now gleamed beneath her feet, hers not just by law, but by right. And as she walked, shoulders back and head held high, the staff moved with her, not as followers but as a team. Together, they would restore the legacy. If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.